Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to dive deep into a question that honestly affects almost all of us. Why exactly does your boss manage you the way they do? The theories we're about to explore, they don't just sit in a dusty textbook somewhere. They literally dictate who gets promoted, your daily stress levels, and the entire structure of your 9 to 5 routine. So, to really understand the daily realities of the modern workplace, we're going to trace the fascinating evolution of management theories.
Take a second and just reflect on your own daily experience. When you walk into your office or log on for the day, how do you actually feel? Are you treated as a rational, highly predictable machine where your only real value is the output you generate? Or are you treated as a complex, highly social human being whose creativity and well-being are actually nurtured? The way you are managed today is definitely not an accident. It's the direct result of distinct historical shifts in how leaders have viewed work and workers over the centuries. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at what is management theory, history of managing people, the classical approach, the human resource approach, and finally, math and modern management. Okay, let's jump into section 1. What is management theory? Foundations of managing people. Before we trace the history, we need a rock-solid definition. Management theory is basically a collection of ideas, concepts, principles, and frameworks. Its entire purpose is to understand, explain, and guide the practice of management within organizations. Think of it as a systematic way of analyzing how to handle people, resources, and processes to actually achieve goals. It's essentially the ultimate playbook for getting things done. Because without these conceptual frameworks, an organization isn't really a company, right? It's just a chaotic group of people pulling in 100 different directions with zero unified purpose. To really grasp what a manager does in practice, there's this fantastic quote from legendary business executive Alfred P. Sloan. He stated that professional managers are there to manage the facts, not opinions, to put the strengths of people to work, and to use dissent and conflict to a positive advantage. But perhaps the most profound takeaway from his philosophy here is that a manager must always accept the responsibility to be a servant of others. That completely flips the traditional boss-employee dynamic on its head. It's an incredibly powerful way to look at leadership.
Moving right along to section 2, history of managing people, from ancient pyramids to the Industrial Revolution.
Effective management played a massive role in human history way before office cubicles were ever a thing. We see the sheer power of management in the unbelievable logistical coordination it took to build the ancient pyramids, literally organizing tens of thousands of workers over decades. We see it in the massive communication and control networks of the Roman Empire. We even see it back in the 14th century with the highly sophisticated legal frameworks of commerce set up in Venice to manage international trade. But the absolute biggest historical turning point arrives with the Industrial Revolution. By the turn of the 20th century, this specific catalyst put the science and practices of management on a rapid, relentless path of formal development. Basically, factories grew massive, and all that chaos demanded order.
Which brings us to section 3, the classical approach. People as rational machines. So that rapid development during the industrial era gave birth to our first major school of thought, the classical approach. And this approach was built on a very specific and frankly kind of cold basic assumption that people are entirely rational. The foundational belief was that workers will simply look at the opportunities available to them and do whatever is necessary just to maximize their economic gain. They viewed people as coin-operated machines. You put money in, you get exact work out. We can contrast this mindset directly with the later human resource assumption, which argues that people are fundamentally social, emotionally complex, and driven by self-actualization. Driven by that classical assumption of the rational, coin-operated worker, we get Frederick Taylor's scientific management. Taylor's goal was to perfectly standardize human motion. Picture this. He would literally stand on factory floors with a stopwatch, timing every single swing of a hammer just to squeeze out maximum efficiency. His rules were incredibly strict. First, develop a literal science for every single job, standardizing every motion. Second, carefully select workers who have exactly the right physical abilities for that specific task. Third, train them carefully and give them direct economic incentives. And fourth, provide the necessary support. It was all about relentless mechanical efficiency. Now, while Taylor focused heavily on the individual workers' movements, Henry Fayol tried to bring order to the sheer chaos of early industrial factory management itself. He introduced his administrative principles, which distilled management down to 5 strict rules: foresight, organization, command, coordination, and control. Fayol also introduced these core organizational principles that are still famous today, like the absolute division of work, the scalar chain of authority, and unity of command.
Actually, unity of command was a massive breakthrough. It simply meant every employee should receive orders from only one superior. Imagine the everyday disaster of having two different bosses screaming totally contradictory orders at you on a noisy factory floor. Fales rule fixed that.
Rounding out the classical school, we've got Max Weber's bureaucratic organization. Now, I know today when we hear the word bureaucracy, we immediately think of endless red tape and soul-crushing forms. But Weber envisioned it as an ideal, intentionally rational and highly efficient form of organization founded on strict logic. This meant a clear division of labor, a well-defined hierarchy, formal rules, careers based strictly on merit, and, importantly, impersonality. I know impersonality sounds awful to us now, but Weber actually designed it to eliminate the rampant nepotism and favoritism of his era. It wasn't meant to be cruel. The whole system was designed to be perfectly fair, totally devoid of personal bias, and entirely logical. All right, let's pivot to Section 4, the human resource approach, the social workplace. Because humans aren't entirely logical machines, are we? Eventually, the pendulum swung heavily away from all that cold logic and right toward the social elements of the workplace. This shift was largely triggered by a massive aha moment known as the Hawthorne studies. Researchers originally went into a factory to see if brighter lighting would make workers produce more. To their absolute surprise, productivity went up when they brightened the lights, sure, but it also went up when they dimmed them. They finally realized that productivity was improving simply because the researchers were paying attention to the workers. This accidentally proved that human psychology, the nature of the work group, and simply feeling noticed directly boost performance. This realization totally opened the door for brilliant, forward-thinking minds like Mary Follett and her concept of dynamic administration. Unlike the rigid classical thinkers with their stopwatches and strict hierarchies, Follett believed that groups were actually mechanisms through which diverse individuals could combine their talents for a greater good. She placed a highly sophisticated value on the power of human cooperation, and she was incredibly radical for her time. She was pioneering concepts back in the 1920s that feel cutting edge even today, things like employee ownership, systems theory, and corporate social responsibility. This era blossomed into what we call the human relations movement. The big idea here was that managers who use good human relations will automatically achieve better productivity. This approach recognized a hierarchy of human needs, starting at the base with a need for basic safety, moving up to social needs, then esteem, and finally peaking at self-actualization. Instead of viewing workers as lazy machines that need strict command and control, this school radically reframes things. It views workers as willing to work, completely capable of self-control, and bursting with imagination, ingenuity, and creativity. They are entirely capable of self-direction. Let's move to our final swing of the pendulum, Section 5, Math and Modern Management, the contingency mindset. Following the mid-20th century, we see the rise of quantitative or management science. This school focuses heavily on using mathematical techniques for problem solving. We're talking techniques like mathematical forecasting, linear programming, inventory modeling, network models, and queuing theory. And this isn't just abstract math for the sake of math. For example, queuing theory is the highly practical formula used to figure out exactly how many tellers a bank needs on a busy Friday afternoon to keep lines moving efficiently without overpaying for idle staff. Math powerfully re-entered the management equation to optimize how businesses function in the real world. But modern management doesn't just rely on math. It relies on total systems thinking. A key concept here is understanding the organization as a living system. There's a critical difference to note. An open system continuously interacts with its environment, taking in resources and outputting products, whereas a closed system does not. Modern management demands that organizations operate as complex open systems. And the environment isn't just nature, right? It means understanding changes in the global economy, watching competitor moves, and navigating fragile supply chain shocks. You literally cannot manage a modern company with your eyes closed to the outside world.
So what does this all mean? The crucial takeaway is this. Modern management approaches actually respect all the previous schools. They respect the classical drive for efficiency, the human resources focus on people, and the quantitative use of math. But the modern synthesis recognizes a contingency mindset. Simply put, no single approach applies universally in all situations. Management must adapt to the specific reality of the moment. For instance, a manager might need to rely on strict classical command and control during a severe financial crisis, but then smoothly transition to a human resource approach to foster collaboration during a creative product brainstorming session. It's all about what fits the situation. We've traveled from the massive logistics of the ancient pyramids through the mechanical stopwatches of the classical era into the human-centric behavioral movements, all the way up to modern systems thinking and advanced math.
So I want you to think about your own workplace tomorrow morning. Is your boss relying on Fail's strict command and control? Are they focusing on Fullett's human cooperation? Or are they using a modern contingency approach, adapting to whatever gets thrown at the team? Identifying the theory ruling your office is really the first step to truly understanding your own work life and career trajectory. Keep observing, keep questioning, and thanks so much for joining us on this explainer.